My starting point when it comes to the consideration of any issue relating to free speech is my passionate belief that the second most precious thing in life is the right to express yourself freely. The most precious thing in life, I think, is food in your mouth, and the third most precious is a roof over your head. But a fixture for me in the number 2 slot is free expression, just below the need to sustain life itself. That is because I have enjoyed free expression in this country all my professional life and fully expect to continue to do so.
Rowan Atkinson, the great comedy master giving us Mr. Bean and Blackadder, is more than just a master of laughs. He is, in fact, a staunch defender of something far more weighty than humor itself, our right to free speech. And in this world today, that is no small feat. Atkinson has never been a man to shy away from expressing his views. The latest regarding the woke culture has made headlines outside the stage or screen. Indeed, a scathing note of his to today's society regarding the cancellation, first phrasing of "think later" is something refreshing, sharp, and, honestly, massively needed in society. We've got more. Let's get ready to unpack his bold challenge to the woke tide and why it's so significant. Rowan Atkinson isn't new to the debate on free speech. Back in 2013, he even stood up for the reform of Section 5 of the Public Order Act in the UK, under which, until recently, insulting speech was criminalized. Why Atkinson, with all his bellyache and peculiar characters, would enter into this legal whirlwind? Because, in his opinion, it set a precedent highly dangerous.
A newspaper rings up Scotland Yard. Someone has said something slightly insulting on Twitter about someone who we think a national treasure. What are you going to do about it? And the police panic and they scrabble around and then grasp the most inappropriate lifeline of all, Section 5 of the Public Order Act, that thing where you can arrest anybody for saying anything that might be construed by anyone else as insulting. You know, they don't seem to need a real victim. They need only to make the judgment that somebody could have been offended if they had heard or read what has been said. The most ludicrous degree of latitude.
It was not only about the comedian's protection, it was about the protection of an entire society against the gradual obliteration of its ability to tolerate discomfort and different points of view. Atkinson argued that humor, by definition, pushes boundaries. If society cannot take being offended, what can it do about the power of debate, reflection, and moral growth? For him, the perspective becomes clear. If we can't be offended, then we aren't free. This is something that Atkinson has said before and bears repeating here. When the safe speech becomes the only speech, it's a slippery road to censorship. And when comedians self-censor to not be offended, the form itself suffers. He even argues that laws against insulting speech does not affect comedians alone. They cover everyone. Everyday conversations, arguments, and even jokes among friends can become fodder. To Atkinson, this is a symptom of a larger cultural tendency in society that is for stifling expression.
I tend to keep myself to myself a lot. I'm not on social media in any shape or form. I prefer to keep all my activities of a personal level, personal and private, just because I find it much more relaxing. I find the whole concept of social media just not
keeping up with it,
sort of
right?
unrelaxing.
Yeah.
It feels like an unrelaxing thing, so I don't do it.
Now, let's bring up the elephant: cancel culture. Atkinson has been rather explicit regarding this matter, often stating it as a bloodthirsty digital mob. One misstep, one misinterpreted comment, and careers are over. Zero context, zero forgiveness, just quick, brutal condemnation. Atkinson finds it all very disturbing. It's choking off what little artistry the entertainment world has. If comedians, writers, and artists are too frightened to strike out into the unknown, then where does that leave raw, challenging work? And let's make no mistake here, how does a society advance when its creators are too scared to confront unpleasant truths? Atkinson's message is pretty simple. Sometimes, creativity does ruffle feathers. You cannot have one without the other. Also, it doesn't just punish mistakes. More often, it abstracts the very context that surrounds it. Atkinson argues that jokes, performances, and statements are rarely analyzed by their original framework.
In a recent interview you gave with the Irish Times, you said comedy's job is to offend, and it seems nowadays people are very careful about what they joke about. Do you worry about where comedy is going?
Not greatly, because it's a cyclical thing. 1 minute, certain jokes or certain attitudes and outlooks are just out of fashion. And in the end, the whole point of a joke is to entertain people. And if people are not entertained, then you haven't, fulfilled your brief.
Comedy, for Rowan Atkinson, isn't merely meant to put one's external feelings into a giggle. It serves as a mirror to society, reflecting its flaws and judging those who think otherwise. Atkinson does all his characters dance along bourgeois values, from remarkable bumbling Mr. Bean to razor-sharp wits like Blackadder. There he speaks for the freedom of the comedian to offend, that apparently the ability to satisfy all cannot be there. Without offense, how can we challenge hypocrisy in our cabin? In the Atkinsonia, to the writers in his sketches, some might not withstand today, but were indeed producing a brand of comedy that was bold and unfiltered. His satire on authority figures or social types was not just random jokes, but critical messages formulated with humor to make one reflect on biases. Atkinson does not entertain, he enlightens, and that is a cause to fight for.
So I'm a great believer that we must have free expression, and in comedy you must be able to make jokes about absolutely anything. I mean, the only question is you would be wise to choose a context in which it's going to be appreciated, because not all jokes suit all contexts. The joke you tell around a table in a restaurant with some friends is not necessarily something for primetime TV. That's a pretty obvious statement, but you'd be surprised how people like to abuse the context of comedy. And people often say, did you hear that joke that comedian said in that Netflix special? Did you think that was right or wrong? And all I say is, I wasn't there. I haven't heard the joke. I wasn't in the audience when the comedian said it. I don't know what the atmosphere was in the room. If people pay to see a comedian, they've got to accept whatever they provide. I'm a great believer that artists should never apologize for their art. You put something out there, you paint a watercolor, you make a joke, you make a television show, whatever it is. If people are offended, that's their problem. It's not yours. You've done your bit. If they don't want you to work for them again, then that's, that may become your problem. But you've done your bit and you've done your best, and it's up to the audience to judge. I'm a great believer that if a joke has an appreciative audience, no matter how small, no matter who they are, then it is worthy. It should be, as it were, allowed.
But the most important point: comedy is completely subjective. What entertains one leaves another dumbstruck. To Atkinson, it is all in the beauty of it. One is not to please everybody, simply to challenge, provoke, and establish a conversation. Atkinson talks about inclusion because it is one of the popular terms referring to the woke movement, and although he values it, he also believes it comes with a great cost: silencing diverse views. To disagree with some aspects in recent times is virtually equivalent to an attack on inclusivity per se.
For me, the best way to increase society's resistance to insulting or offensive speech is to allow a lot more of it. As with childhood diseases, you can better resist those germs to which you have been exposed. We need to build our immunity to taking offense, so that we can deal with the issues that perfectly justified criticism can raise. Our priority should be to deal with the message, not the messenger.
Atkinson is adamant on the point that true inclusiveness must embrace the opinions that differ rather than silence them. To equate dissent with bigotry is to forfeit the progressive element that moves society forward: diversity of thought. Ironically, is it not? A movement that purports to embrace all becomes the only stifler, for there is no one-size-fits-all. For Atkinson, The current cultural climate has become so restrictive that people are afraid to express anything that might deviate from the norm. This, he believes, is a dangerous place for society to be. Dialogue and debate, not censorship, are the tools that lead to understanding and progress. Satire has always been one of the most powerful tools in a comedian's arsenal. But in today's world, where every word is scrutinized, satire is becoming a relic of the past. Atkinson laments this decline, pointing out how some of his past work might not survive the Twitter storm if it debuted today. He recalls sketches that were provocative and divisive, but were ultimately designed to challenge societal norms. Atkinson isn't advocating for thoughtless provocation. He's defending the comedian's right to push boundaries. Without that, satire loses its edge, and society loses its ability to laugh at itself. And satire isn't just about making fun of others, it's about self-reflection too. Atkinson's characters have often mocked societal hypocrisies, but they've also held up a mirror to his flaws. That's the essence of good satire. It's unflinchingly honest, even when it's uncomfortable. Atkinson's fight against woke culture isn't just theoretical, it's deeply personal. He acknowledges that as a high-profile figure, he's afforded a level of protection many others don't have. But his concern is for those who lack a platform, who are silenced before they even get a chance to speak. The freedom to express yourself, Atkinson argues, is a cornerstone of creativity. Without it, we risk creating a society that is intellectually stagnant, where ideas are homogenized and innovation is stifled. For Atkinson, this isn't just about comedy, it's about the future of discourse itself.
The clear problem with the outlawing of insult is that too many things can be interpreted as such. Criticism is easily construed as insult by certain parties. Ridicule easily construed as insult. Sarcasm, unfavorable comparison, merely stating an alternative point of view to the orthodoxy can be interpreted as insult. And because so many things can be interpreted as insult, it is hardly surprising that so many things have been.
Atkinson is optimistic so far as the critique goes. He thinks the stand-up will come back as cyclical as culture is. This upswing wave of hypersensitivity may dominate in the now, but he has full faith that humor will find ways to adapt and last. Comedy's business is to amuse, by his virtue. If it doesn't do that, then the joke doesn't work. But the key, he insists, is that comedians must remain true to their art. They must resist the temptation of self-censorship and continue to confront norms, however controversial they may be. The essence of comedy is being able to think, not just laugh, for Atkinson. And as long as inventors are willing to take chances, comedy shall evolve. Rowan Atkinson's criticism of being woke is about more than just calling for a defense of comedy. He calls for courage toward freedom of speech and creativity, as well as intellectual pluralism. To have bold positions such as his calls to remind people that discomfort is not something to be feared, it is something to be embraced. What do you think? Is free expression still possible in this new society? Is there still room for comedy in this hypersensitivity era? Let us know what you think in the comments.